Okay, so imagine this, right?
Hmm.
It's 1869,
Okay.
just a few years after the Civil War.
Mm.
The nation's, still pretty divided,
Yeah. Yeah.
struggling to put the pieces back together.
Right.
And standing on the steps of the Capitol, about to take the oath of office, is a man who honestly
Oh, yeah.
feels more comfortable in a military uniform than a suit.
I bet.
Ulysses S. Grant.
Um.
So today we're going to kind of do a deep dive
Okay.
into Grant's presidency.
All right.
It's a period that's, marked by these incredible triumphs, but also some serious scandals.
Hmm.
And they really reveal a man who's a lot more complex than I think the history books often give him credit for.
Absolutely. I think what's really interesting to consider right at the start is that Grant walked into this presidency with like just this immense weight of expectation on his shoulders.
Right.
I mean, think about it. He's a war hero.
Yeah, he literally saved the Union.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
people had this hope
Right.
that he would bring that same decisiveness and strength that he had in the military to the political world.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And he definitely laid out this pretty bold vision in his inaugural address.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, talking about paying off the national debt
Right.
in gold,
Wow.
granting citizenship to Native Americans, supporting black suffrage. I mean, huge, huge ideas.
These are radical ideas, even for the time.
Absolutely radical for the time. It really gives us this glimpse into,
Uh-huh.
his idealism, his belief in this truly unified nation.
Mhm.
But what we're going to see is that idealism kind of clashes with
Right.
the realities of
Yeah.
politics and those deep-seated prejudices of the time.
Yeah. And it's interesting because his early cabinet appointments were kind of this mix
Oh, yeah.
of seasoned politicians, but then also some personal friends.
It's a recipe for disaster sometimes, right?
Well, yeah. It
Yeah.
seems like some were brilliant choices and then others, well,
Not so much.
not so much. And then on top of that, tragedy strikes really just months into his presidency. Oh, right.
His close friend and war secretary, John Rawlings, dies from tuberculosis.
I mean, Rawlings was more than just a friend.
Right.
He was a trusted advisor. He was somebody who understood how politics worked.
Totally.
And so losing him, I think, left Grant really vulnerable,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even more trusting of people who wanted to take advantage of that trust.
Right, right. And that kind of brings us to one of the most, I think, notorious episodes of Grant's presidency,
Yeah.
the gold scandal.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a story of just financial manipulation on a huge scale.
it's a big one.
You got figures like Jay Gould and Jim Fisk
Oh, yeah, those guys.
trying to corner the gold market.
Corner the market. I mean, imagine just the audacity of these
Oh,
guys.
yeah.
Trying to control the nation's gold supply for their own personal gain.
Totally, totally.
And what's even crazier is that Grant's own brother-in-law
Oh, gosh.
gets caught up in this whole scheme.
Talk about a family drama.
I know, right?
So Black Friday, the day that gold bubble burst, I mean, it sent shockwaves through the entire economy.
Mm-hmm.
And it really tarnished Grant's reputation. You know,
Sure.
it kind of showed that he had this blind spot,
Right.
an inability to see what people were really doing around him.
And I think some historians would argue that it was his military background
Oh, interesting.
that almost made him ill-equipped to navigate the subtleties and complexities of politics.
Yeah, it's so different.
Right, because he was used to giving orders, not brokering deals, and
Yeah.
figuring out everyone's hidden motives.
Totally different skill set.
Yeah.
So then we have this other intriguing episode that I really want to dig into.
Okay.
And that is Grant's ambition to annex Santo Domingo,
All right.
which is now, of course, the Dominican Republic.
Right.
So he kind of envisioned this as a haven for Black Americans
Oh, wow.
who were facing just horrific discrimination at home.
Yeah.
But his efforts were blocked by a lot of political maneuvering,
Well, yeah, it was a bold move, right?
Yeah.
And I think especially from Senator Charles Sumner,
Yeah.
he really fought against this.
Yeah, it's interesting because Grant really believed in this idea,
Mm-hmm.
both as a way to kind of expand American influence,
Right.
but also as this real humanitarian gesture.
Right.
But I think what he didn't fully understand was the power of political opposition,
Mm-hmm.
especially when it came to race and this idea of expansionism.
Yeah. Those are some pretty touchy subjects for the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But, despite those setbacks, Grant, he achieved some pretty significant victories for Reconstruction.
Totally.
I mean, the 15th Amendment guaranteeing black men the right to vote
Yeah.
was ratified during his presidencies.
Yeah.
And he appointed black Americans to these really prominent positions,
That's huge.
even as the Ku Klux Klan was gaining power in the South.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, these actions really showed his commitment to equality, even when he was facing like serious resistance,
Mm-hmm.
because he understood how important it was to bring black Americans fully into American democracy.
Mm-hmm. And then on the international stage, his administration really skillfully, I think, resolved tensions with Great Britain.
Oh, yeah, with the Alabama claims.
Yeah, through the Alabama claims.
That was a big one.
So for those who don't know, this dispute, it stemmed from the damages caused by Confederate ships that were actually built in Britain during the Civil War.
Right.
And they settled this through international arbitration, which is huge.
It was a landmark moment in diplomacy.
Yeah.
And I think it's a testament to Grant's diplomatic skills, which I think often get kind of overshadowed by
Right.
the scandals.
Right.
But he really did recognize the importance of peaceful resolution.
Mhm.
And he kind of set this precedent for resolving international disputes through negotiation rather than just going to war.
That's huge.
Yeah.
So back on the home front, though, corruption's still a problem,
it's going.
plaguing his administration.
Yeah.
So you have the Credit Mobilier scandal, which involved a railroad construction company. They were bribing congressmen,
They were.
and it even ensnared the vice president, Schuyler Colfax,
Oh, wow.
forcing Grant to drop him from the ticket for his second term.
It's a mess.
I mean, this scandal, along with all the others, it really reveals how much corruption had just seeped into American politics during the Gilded Age.
It was everywhere. It wasn't just Grant's administration. I mean, it was
Yeah, but
a widespread problem.
yeah,
But the fact that it happened under his watch,
right.
it just eroded public trust even more.
Yeah. And then as he starts his second term, the Panic of 1873 hits.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're talking full-blown economic depression.
That's a rough time.
And it's triggered by railroad speculation, fires, financial instability in Europe. It was a lot going on.
There was a lot.
And Grant, he had this hard money approach.
Right.
He backed the Specie Payment Resumption Act,
Mm-hmm.
which was aimed at restoring the value of the dollar by backing it with gold.
Yeah.
Now, some argue that this actually made the economic hardship worse.
It's interesting, right? It raises the question. Were his economic policies misguided?
Right.
Or were they just a reflection of what everybody thought at the time? And I
Right.
think that's a debate that's still going on among historians.
Totally. So just when you think it can't get more complicated,
Oh, boy.
the whiskey ring scandal explodes. And this is a whole other
Another big one.
worms of worms, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're talking tax evasion by distillers. We're talking corrupt officials.
Mhm.
It cost the government millions of dollars.
Millions.
Millions.
The whiskey ring was probably the most damaging to his legacy.
Oh, yeah.
It really showed just how much corruption had gotten into his inner circle.
Yeah.
And it led a lot of people to question, his judgment and his leadership.
Absolutely.
Eh.
And so the investigation, which was led by Treasury Secretary Benjamin Bristow,
Right.
uncovers these cryptic warnings to a key player in the scheme.
Interesting.
They're signed Sylph.
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 Okay.
And to everybody's shock,
Oh, no.
Sylph turns out to be
Okay, who is it?
Orville Babcock,
Oh, wow.
his close friend and personal secretary.
No way.
It was a shocking revelation.
That's got to be rough.
I know. And it's really, I think, tested his loyalty to his friend
Mm-hmm.
against his duty to uphold the law.
Yeah,
And this is, I think, a real turning point in his presidency.
absolutely. I mean, it really puts Grant's character into focus, doesn't it? You
Yeah.
have this celebrated war hero, and he just can't seem to grasp the level of deceit that's happening right there in front of him.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder,
Right.
was it just naivete?
Yeah.
Or was it this unwavering loyalty to his friends, even when that loyalty was misplaced?
Sure.
It's a fascinating question, and our sources kind of paint this interesting picture
Mm-hmm.
of how those close to Grant viewed him.
Yeah.
So you've got a William Tecumseh Sherman,
Right.
his trusted general during the war,
Yeah.
and he believed that Grant actually shared some responsibility for the corruption.
Oh, interesting.
He thought Grant could have been more proactive in rooting it out,
Hmm.
maybe less willing to give people the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I mean, he was known for his loyalty,
Right.
but maybe that was a little bit too much.
Yeah, but then you've got others like David Dyer who really defended Grant's integrity.
Right.
And they argued that his loyalty, even though it was sometimes misguided,
Yeah.
came from his own sense of honor. Like, he
Yeah.
just couldn't believe that the people he trusted would actually betray him.
It's almost like he was too trusting.
Right.
It's almost like he couldn't fathom that people would be dishonest
Right.
because he himself was so honest.
Yeah, there's this quote from Otis Tiffany that I found really interesting. He describes Grant as being, quote, absolutely incapable of civility.
Okay.
And he doesn't mean, like, rude.
Right.
He means incapable of understanding that someone would pretend to be loyal just for personal gain.
Wow. So he just saw the world through his own lens of
Uh,
honesty.
And it makes you think,
Yeah.
how would any of us react if we were in that kind of situation?
Right.
You know, surrounded by all these people, vying for power,
Yeah.
whispering in your ear,
Mm-hmm.
trying to, play on your trust for their own agendas.
I think it's a tough spot to be in.
Totally.
I think it's easy for us to judge historical figures looking back,
Yeah.
but we have to consider what it was like back then,
Right.
the pressures, the social norms,
Totally.
and their own personal blind spots.
I mean, it's been
I mean,
dirty.
nobody's perfect.
It reminds me of Walt Whitman's description of Grant.
Oh, yeah.
He called him, quote, the greatest hero.
Okay.
But then he also called him a common trader, moneymaker, tanner, farmer, general for the Republic, president following.
It's interesting, right? Like,
He's acknowledging both sides.
right, and there's a real sense of humanity in that description.
Yeah.
It's acknowledging his accomplishments, but also his flaws.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes Grant's story so compelling.
Right.
It's not just this straightforward hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's about a man dealing with this enormous responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
trying to navigate a world that often went against his values.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's complicated.
Totally. And then you have the Babcock situation. I
Right.
mean, Grant is absolutely convinced that Babcock's innocent.
Mm-hmm.
And he provides this deposition for Babcock's trial.
Wow.
He even vouches for Babcock's character.
Think about, he's the president of the United States,
Yeah.
putting his own reputation at stake
Right.
to defend a friend
Right.
who's accused of being involved in this huge corruption scandal.
I know. It says a lot about his loyalty.
But it also maybe says something about his inability to see the bigger picture.
Right.
But the evidence against Babcock was pretty overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
Even though he was acquitted,
Okay.
Grant eventually had to remove him from his inner circle
He did.
because he realized just how deep this betrayal went.
Yeah. That must have been hard.
I can't imagine.
To have someone you trust so completely to be
Uh-huh.
involved in something like that.
I know.
It's a reminder that even the best leaders
Right.
can be tricked and deceived.
And this whole thing, it really put a strain on Grant's relationship with Bristow.
Right, the guy who was in charge of the investigation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bristow was relentless in his pursuit of corruption,
Mm,
even among Grant's close friends.
yeah.
And that created this tension between them.
Right. I mean, you can see how Bristow's actions,
Yeah.
even though he was trying to expose the truth,
Mm-hmm.
could be seen by Grant as a personal attack.
Right.
It put Grant in this impossible position. Does he defend his friend or does he uphold the law?
Exactly.
I don't envy that.
No. And Bristow eventually resigned.
He did.
And Grant accepted his resignation,
Oh.
but their relationship never really recovered.
Oh, wow.
And it seems like Grant felt betrayed by Bristow's pursuit of justice,
Yeah.
even if that pursuit was the right thing to do.
It's tough.
It is tough, and it really highlights how lonely and thankless leadership can be.
I mean, you're
Yeah.
constantly making decisions that are going to upset people,
Right.
even your allies.
So as we kind of examine Grant's presidency,
Mm-hmm.
this question just keeps coming up.
Yeah.
Was he a naive idealist who was easily manipulated?
Right.
Or was he a principled leader trying to do good
Yeah.
in a world that was full of corruption?
And I think that's the question historians are still debating. There's no easy answer.
Right.
But what's important is that we engage with the complexity of his story.
Right.
You know, we have to understand the context of his time
Yeah.
and recognize that even great leaders are human
Mm-hmm.
with all the strengths and weaknesses that come with it.
And what strikes me is that there's this tendency to view Grant as either a hero or a failure.
Yeah.
But it's more nuanced than that.
Way more.
He was a man of contradictions,
Yeah.
capable of great things,
Yeah.
and also really serious mistakes.
He was human.
Yeah. I mean, that's what makes history so fascinating, isn't it?
It really is.
It's not just like dates and battles.
Yeah.
It's about people.
It's about the stories.
Yeah, and the choices that they make, and the flaws and the contradictions that make them human.
To make them relatable.
Yeah, yeah. And Grant's story is a really powerful reminder, I think, that leadership,
Oh, yeah.
no matter how successful you are in one area, it doesn't mean you'll be successful in another.
Totally.
You know? Like, the skills that made him such a brilliant general
Right.
weren't necessarily the same skills he needed to navigate politics.
Especially Gilded Age politics.
Oh, yeah. Totally different ballgame.
A whole different beast.
Yeah. And it also, I think, challenges us to think about our own biases
Oh, for sure.
and our own loyalties. I mean, would we have been more discerning than Grant?
Right.
Would we have seen those warning signs?
Yeah, would we have fallen into the same traps
Yeah.
with trust and deception?
Exactly. It's a question we're thinking about, especially now, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, think about it. We are just bombarded with information.
Constantly.
Spin, lies. It's tough.
So much to sift through.
It is tough. And I think that's why it's more important than ever to really be able to think critically, to question what we see and hear,
Right.
and to be careful about who we trust.
Couldn't agree more.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Ulysses S. Grant,
Okay.
what can we really take away from his legacy?
Yeah, it's so complex.
It is complex and contradictory,
Mm-hmm.
but he was a champion of civil rights. He was
Yeah.
a skilled diplomat, and he led the nation through this incredibly tumultuous period of
Absolutely.
healing and rebuilding.
Yeah, he had a lot on his plate.
He really did.
But at the same time, his presidency was also tarnished by these scandals.
Right.
That showed, maybe he wasn't as good at spotting corruption.
Right, and he trusted people maybe a little too easily.
Yeah.
And so he was both a product of his time,
Mm-hmm.
but also someone who was trying to push beyond the limitations of his time.
Right.
It's really fascinating.
It is.
And I think what his story really shows us is that history is not just this simple story of heroes and villains.
Right.
It's more like this tapestry.
I like that, a tapestry.
Yeah, with all these different threads. Some are bright, some are dark.
Yeah.
But they all come together to create this really rich and often messy picture.
Absolutely. And I think that's what keeps bringing us back
Okay.
with these deep dives.
Yeah.
It's not just the facts and figures. It's those moments where we connect with the past,
Yeah.
and it helps us understand the present.
Absolutely.
Those aha moments.
Yeah. And so if you enjoyed this deep dive into Ulysses S. Grant
Yeah.
and you're ready for more,
Yeah.
make sure you subscribe and join us for our next episode.
Yeah, we've got some great stuff coming up.
We're going to be looking at Reconstruction,
Oh, yeah.
the Indian Wars,
Can't wait for that one.
the rise of industrialism.
Mhm.
It's going to be good.
Lots to explore.
It is.
It's always exciting to delve into the past,
Absolutely.
Always something new to learn.
Yeah. So until next time, keep exploring,
Yes.
keep questioning,
Keep those minds engaged.
and we'll see you on our next deep dive.
Looking forward to it.